Welcome to our session about preparing to breastfeed your baby by Miriam, Feen, myself, and Kathryn Stagg for the Lactation Corner.
My name is Kathryn. I am an international board certified lactation consultant and a holistic sleep coach, and I am mum to 4 boys.
And I am Miriam Feen, and I am an international board certified lactation consultant. And I have been supporting parents together with Kathryn with nearly 15 years. My background is in nursing, and I have 2 daughters. So, what support you might need? There's lots of support for new parents, but sometimes it could be a little bit difficult to know where to find it. So obviously your healthcare professionals, the health visitors, and your midwives will be your first port of call when you need any support. Midwives usually will either come to your home or they will arrange for you to see them for checking how you are doing and how your baby is doing as well. Then the health visitors will take over until your child is 5 years old. Please check out any breastfeeding support groups in your area that are usually run from children's centers or family wellbeing centers. These are usually provided by the infant feeding team in your locality, and they will really depend on an individual locality. You also have a breastfeeding helplines, which are actually run together between Association of Breastfeeding Mothers and the Breastfeeding Network. So the National Breastfeeding Helpline is open 365 days, and they also have some overnight capacity as well. So if you need to speak to someone about any issues, please do give them a call. We obviously have the Lactation League of Great Britain, which holds some group sessions, either online or in person. So again, check what is available in your locality. IBCLC, International Board Certified Lactation Consultants, are the gold standards for any breastfeeding issues. And you can have a look at a registry, which is the Lactation Consultants of Great Britain, where you can again search who is available in your local area. And maybe this might be a good idea to do before actually your baby arrives, so you know where to go if there is any need for more support. And then, of course, you have your friends and family, which can be really, really amazing support. Sometimes not necessarily with the feeding, but with all adjusting to the new parenthood and helping you and supporting you with anything that hopefully needs to be done. So please just sort of ask your friends and family. Sometimes they are very happy to help. They just need sort of sometimes a little bit encouragement.
So we're going to talk a little bit about how milk production works. So breasts are make milk. They are called mammary glands, and they're part of us being a mammal. All mammals feed their babies basically from their breasts or their mammary glands. The size of your breast does not matter. You can have big breasts, small breasts. They will still make milk. The majority of people can make a good amount of milk for their baby. There are a few where there's maybe not enough breast tissue or some other hormonal issues, but it's very, very rare. And if you are feeling that this is the case, please do seek out some established and expert breastfeeding support to help you maximize your potential. But the majority of people, if breastfeeding is going well, they can make a really good amount of milk for their baby. You do not need to have a perfect diet to keep your milk nutritious. You will read all sorts of things out there on the internet and in books and all the, old wives' tales. People will tell you that you can't eat certain foods. The majority of people can eat absolutely anything that they want, and that will not affect their baby at all. Very rarely, a baby may be intolerant or allergic to something that is coming through your milk. But again, it is actually very rare, and it's very overdiagnosed. But there are a few babies that are actually very sensitive to things. Hopefully you will not have one of these. And if you feel that you do, again, please do reach out for some specialist support around this. Lactation consultant is a very good place to start for anything, more difficult or more, serious around, different conditions that you have. Your milk is made from your blood. So it's made in this basically the same way as your blood is made. It's actually got some of the same things in it as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. So what can get into your bloodstream can get into your milk. So there are some medications that will pass through to your baby, and there are also caffeine and alcohol. It is fine to have caffeine and alcohol in small quantities. So maybe a one alcoholic drink, or a couple of cups of coffee a day, that kind of thing is absolutely fine to do. And most medications are actually safe, even though some of them do pass through to your baby. They pass through in very, very small quantities, and they don't generally affect your baby. If you have any questions around medication, if you've been told you have to stop breastfeeding, for example, because of a medication they are suggesting you should take, please do check out the Drugs in Breast Milk Information Service run by the Breastfeeding Network. They have all the latest research on loads and loads of different medications. They're the absolute experts in this field and often know more than your doctors actually on this topic. So please don't stop breastfeeding until you've contacted them, because it actually may be okay. The majority of medications are safe when you're breastfeeding. We're expecting some breast changes during pregnancy. So you should have experienced maybe your breasts becoming a little bit more sensitive. They may have grown in size by a size or two. And also sometimes they feel a little bit sort of firm and warm and, a bit more sensitive than normal. So that is very, very normal. And that's just your breast basically getting ready to feed your baby.
Breastfeeding hormones. So there are two main hormones that are really responsible for the milk production. So the first one is prolactin. So prolactin really is responsible for the milk production. So it's like the chef really making the milk in your breasts. And prolactin really needs to be stimulated by baby suckling at the breast. It's also stimulated by touch. And that's why we always say that babies need to be fed very frequently and very often. And preferably, we need to stimulate the breast as soon as possible when we welcome our gorgeous babies, just to start this prolactin receptors switching on and starting to produce the breast. Any parent, whether they choose to breastfeed or not, will start a milk production because it's a hormonally driven change in mom's body once she welcomes a baby, and especially when the placenta is born. However, within a few hours, it will change into supply and demand production. So what it means is we need to remove the breast milk from the breast, and we also need to stimulate the breast frequently and often so the production can actually pick up and create enough breast milk for the demand that we are needing for our individual babies. The other hormone is oxytocin. Oxytocin is the hormone that releases the milk. So it's responsible for the letdown or the milk ejection reflex. So when the baby actually comes towards the breast, they start nuzzling, they start actually licking the breast. And this then indicates mom's body and mom's brain that we need to start releasing the milk because baby is ready to feed. And that's when the oxytocin starts to peak and the letdown and the milk ejection reflex happen. Oxytocin is also called the love hormone because it's the same hormone that makes us fall in love. And it's also called a shy hormone because it's quite easily inhibited by the stress hormone cortisol. As you probably know, you can't be in a relaxed state and at a stress state at the same time. However, oxytocin can be brought back into a relaxed state quite easily. Maybe if we kind of relax, we listen to some relaxing music, gentle touch, or a little bit of back massage or foot massage will bring the oxytocin back up again so the milk can be released a little bit easier. And oxytocin is really stimulated by feeling safe, secure, loved, and loving. So words of affirmation and relaxation really help with the oxytocin. The highest peak of oxytocin is straight away after the birth, but every time mom's breastfeed, oxytocin is released and it's actually relaxing both the parent and the baby as well. There is also a protein in a breast milk, which is called feedback inhibitor of lactation, or FIL for short. And this protein becomes into breast milk when it needs to suppress any further milk production, when the milk storage capacity is filled up. So when the milk production is actually reached its capacity, this feedback inhibitor of lactation will switch off the supply. And it's kind of sort of quite a clever way for Mother Nature to ensure that your breasts won't burst. But we actually don't want to have a lot of fill in our breast milk because we want the production to be continuous and working on demand, whatever the baby needs. That's why we also need to feed the babies very frequently and very often.
So our human milk, our breast milk, is actually a living food. We've got a little chart here comparing artificial milk, which is formula milk, and human milk. And as you can see, the formula milk is made up from a fair few of the same things as in human milk. It's generally made from cow's milk. There are some alternatives, but generally cow's milk. But you cannot feed a human on cow's milk. Each species makes a specific milk for their baby and their parenting style and their growth pattern of the baby. So it's very specific. So if we gave our babies cow's milk, our babies would grow in the same way that a baby cow would grow. And of course, that is not what we want. We have to have more brain growth, and we want actually our bodies to grow less quickly than the cow does. So we have to basically process the cow's milk and change the balance of nutrients in order for it to grow a human in the right way. But you can see there's quite a lot of stuff missing as well. And these are all the live factors in our human milk. And our human milk is very much around the immunoglobulins and just like preventing pathogens coming in and viruses and helping our baby's sort of immune system. It also helps to seed the microbiome. And we've just, there's so much research going on now about how important a healthy microbiome is, and it has a massive effect on things like allergy and obesity. So we can start our babies off with a really healthy microbiome by giving them some lots of breast milk, lots of skin-to-skin contact as well. So all these things are so exciting. We're total breast milk nerds, myself and Miriam. So let's think the viral fragments, for example. This is just one I'm going to pick out. If you come into contact with a virus, could be COVID, could be a cold, could be flu, anything around that, you will make antibodies to the specific virus that you have come into contact with. And also, if your baby comes into contact with it separate to you, maybe they've started at childcare, for example, and picked up something, actually your breast milk will still make the antibodies to the virus, even though you haven't had direct exposure to it. So just absolutely fascinating stuff. We could talk about this all day, but I will move on to the next slide.
So colostrum, let's just talk a little bit about colostrum. So colostrum is breast milk, but because it's so special, it has its special name. So it is the first milk that is produced by the breasts, and it's also produced antenatally just with the preparation of welcoming the babies. Colostrum is also called the liquid gold, partially because it can be quite yellow in color. It's kind of like a honey-like in color and in texture in a sense. It can be quite sticky, it can be quite gloopy, and it comes in a very small quantities. It really only comes in drops because we don't need a huge amount to begin with. But the other reason why we call colostrum liquid gold is because it's full packed of antibodies. And sometimes we call the colostrum babies first immunizations. So when any antibodies that mom has in her bloodstream will be actually passed to the baby through the colostrum. So it is an amazing preventative element in terms of the colostrum. And that's why we would generally suggest, if perhaps some parents might choose not to breastfeed, or they can't breastfeed, or they don't want to breastfeed, even if they could just express a little colostrum and give it to the baby, it will have a huge benefits for their individual babies. Babies are also born with a black tarry stool, the meconium. Meconium is actually broken down red blood cells because babies have an exaggerated amount of red blood cells. So we want to get rid of it as soon as possible. So colostrum also has a laxative effect that helps babies that pass the meconium with ease, kind of get rid of it faster. Babies are also born quite immature. So in terms of their internal organs, they are still developing in the first few weeks, first few months. And one of those is also the intestinal tract. So on a molecular level, it has a kind of permeable structure. It has a sieve-like structure. So what the colostrum does is creating this white wash paint effect and creating a protective layer to stop any particles seeping through. And this is also believed to reduce allergies in babies. So again, an amazing, amazing property. Colostrum comes in a small quantities, and colostrum is produced in the first day or two or thereabouts. And then the colostrum is going to change into something which we call transitional milk. So what it means is that there's a little bit more water innocence added. So the colostrum is like a very concentrated, like a squash or Ribena, and then the water is added to a little bit because we need a larger amounts. And then generally from the about 4 or 5 onwards, after the birth, provided that we stimulate the breast frequently and we feed babies often and frequently, the mature milk is going to be produced. The mature milk looks very much like a skimmed milk, so it's very thin, it's quite see-through, so it's not the double cream that parents sometimes may think. And that's exactly what it should look like because breast milk is nearly 90% of water. So this is just a general idea what the babies need in the first few days, first few weeks. So the newborn intake is very, very small. So on day one, the tummy is probably a size of a cherry. So this is equivalent to maybe a half to 1 teaspoon. That's the smallest spoon that you have in your drawer. And that's enough for babies at each feed because their tummy is quite small. As they grow on day 3, they probably have somewhere between 10 to 15 mils, and it's probably a walnut size. And at around 1 week, it might be somewhere between 30 to 50 mil, and the tummy size could be roughly somewhere around the apricot size. And then around 1 month old, baby's tummy probably might take somewhere between 90 to about 120 mils or thereabouts. And the size can be roughly like an egg. This is very generalized and each baby is individual. So please speak to a breastfeeding specialist or lactation consultant who can actually give you an individual look at babies.
So we just talked about the milk coming in. How does it actually work? So your milk production in pregnancy it's basically kept a lid on by your pregnancy hormone, which is called progesterone. So it's kind of like driving around with a handbrake on. You cannot make a full production of milk because of your pregnancy hormones, because we wouldn't want to actually spend lots of energy making milk. We would, that would take a lot of energy. We're already growing a baby. We don't need to waste lots of energy on making milk, but it is important that our breasts begin to practice, really. So when we have no baby, our body just absorbs the colostrum that we do not use. It just reabsorbs it and gets rid of it. Once the placenta is birthed, it's kind of like releasing the handbrake, and we kind of whiz up through the gears into the open road of full milk production, to use an analogy, over the first week or so. So as long as a baby is feeding frequently and effectively, this should just happen. And as your baby's intake begins to naturally increase, as Miriam just described, your milk production should also naturally increase as well. Some people feel very full when their milk comes in. It usually peaks around day 4 or 5. Some people don't really notice it, and we often have parents contacting us thinking that their milk hasn't come in yet. And actually it has, it's just the baby is drinking lots of it. So they're not so obvious, they're not kind of making too much. Some people, of course, have a bit of a bumpier road to getting their milk production going. So if it's not working particularly well or you're having to give extra milk, please do seek some support straight away as soon as possible. We can get sort of feeding plans in place, and we can kind of help you with your milk production as well as helping with direct breastfeeding as well. So do seek support early if you're having any problems around your milk supply.
Skin to skin. So skin to skin is really, really important to carry on doing. A lot of the time, parents may think that it's just a little tick exercise when babies are born, but you can carry on doing skin to skin days, weeks, months after your baby is born, because when we are in a skin to skin, we feel much more relaxed. So, when babies and their parents are in a skin to skin, especially with the breastfeeding parents, it does promote the milk production and it also promotes the bonding and it's starting the breastfeeding instincts both in a mummy and in a baby as well. So, it's important to carry on doing that and maybe even breastfeed in a skin to skin because it's sort of, really lovely for babies to be with mom and welcoming them and getting too used to each other is really quite nice. When babies are skin to skin, they are much more relaxed because the oxytocin is transferring both in a mum and a baby, and we are much more relaxed. And we know when we are more relaxed, that's when it really helps with the baby's brain development. This is when the neurons in a baby's brain are really starting to fire and starting to really develop very, very fast. When babies are on mom's chest, they are also being colonized, but all the friendly bacteria, the microbiome that is specific to their individual environment. So that's why, especially after birth, it's best if baby actually comes onto the mom's chest so they can colonize with their individual specific microbiome that is specific for them, for their family, and for their environment. And we know that the microbiome is really important for setting in good gut health because the more of the friendly bacteria are seeded at the beginning of their life, the better outcome is actually for later on in their life as well. Because baby are nice and calm and relaxed, it also helps and supports them with the sleep and also reduces the stress levels. If babies are quite upset, it usually calms them down because of the oxytocin levels sort of, getting higher. And we know that when babies are nice and calm and relaxed, this also regulates their temperature, their breathing, their blood pressure, heart rate, and blood sugars. In terms of a temperature, we know that mom's chest can actually go up or down a few degrees to accommodate the baby. So, for example, if they need to cool down, if it's very hot, their mom's chest will actually get a little bit cooler. And again, for example, if baby is maybe a little bit unwell and they might have a temperature, if they are in a skin to skin with mom's chest will again sort of cool down a little bit. Or if babies are a little bit, the temperature is a little bit lower and they need to kind of warm up, it's actually best to bring the babies in the chest, in a skin to skin on a mom's chest. So mom's chest will warm up the baby and help them increase their body temperature. In terms of the blood sugar, this is especially important for any parent that have a diabetes or might perhaps have gestational diabetes, because babies of those moms will be monitored after the birth, because there is a slightly higher chance that they might have a low blood sugar, hypoglycemia. So again, it's important to keep babies in skin to skin as much as possible. Obviously, we know that sometimes it's not possible to do the skin to skin, maybe straight away after birth, if maybe mom needs to go in a theatre or there needs to be any treatment given to the mom that just given birth. And obviously, the partners, dads are the best next thing to do skin to skin with the baby. Ideally, we try babies in a skin to skin just in a nappy. So the baby is naked, the parent's chest is naked as well, and there is the contact between the skin of baby and the parent. Ideally, we would like babies to be just in a nappy, but like the dad with the lovely twins, even if just baby's cheek touches their parent's skin, it's considered a partial skin to skin. I don't think those twins are actually straight away after birth. They are a little bit older. And then, of course, the birthing parent can resume or start doing skin to skin as soon as they are reunited or as soon as it is safe to do so. And then you can maybe take it in turns and flip a coin who is going to have a lovely cuddles with your gorgeous babies. So how to hold your baby to breastfeed. This is a general suggestion that applies to any position we are feeding baby at. And we'll talk about positions in a little bit later. But the main principle is an acronym CHIN, which means close, head free, in line, and nose to nipple. So I'm going to just a little bit demonstrate. I've got my lovely doll here. So when we talk about being close, we want really close contact with mom's body. Okay, so ideally we move the hands so they are not in front of the baby, but we are trying to open the arms as much as possible. And this is sometimes that you might want a help of your partner, maybe just to sort of, hold your baby's hand so they can really open the arms quite wide. Because if there is a hand in front of the baby's body, then it's much more difficult for baby to come onto the breast directly. So we want to as full frontal attachment onto the mom's body and onto the breast as possible without any restriction. When we talk about head free, so a lot of parents sometimes think watch the head and they start to put their hand on the top of the head. That actually is not quite good because babies are quite sensitive and this is a skull, so you don't really need to support anything there. However, we do need to support baby's head when the spine ends, just at the base here. So when we are trying to hold the baby, we'll make a hand like that, and we start actually on the upper back rather than anywhere near the head. And we just use an index finger and a thumb to hold the baby between the ear. This way, we are supporting baby's head. Baby is nice and secure. However, the baby is in charge, whether they want to tilt their head or they want to move their head, and they have a full functionality of their head without any restriction. And this is also important because babies really need to tilt their head back when they are coming onto the breast to take a big mouthful. So if you feel that your baby might perhaps not opening their mouth as wide, just check the position of your hand, whether it may be sneaked up a little bit higher onto the baby's head, in which case just bringing the head down again on the upper back will help the baby and yourself as well. When we talk about babies being in line, we are not saying baby needs to be horizontal like that. Babies can feed in any positions, okay? However, what we do not want is that the baby's head is twisted sideways, because if that happens, they can't swallow very well. So when we talk about in line, we want the head, shoulder, or a bum, or the nose, chest, and a belly button in a straight line. So without twisting the head to a side. Again, sometimes we are concentrating on the head area and the body will twist. If that's happening, the baby will look something like this. So all we need to do, just bring baby's body nice and flush and close again towards the mom's body, and that will help with this. When we talk about nose to nipple, I'm just going to talk about it in a moment, but the main thing is we want the babies to be able to tilt their head back. So think about it as if you were maybe taking a big mouthful from an apple or pear. Okay, when we approach the fruit straight on, we do open our mouth a little bit, but it's usually the chin that goes down. Okay, but if we have an unrestricted movement of our head, we can tilt our head back and we will achieve much, much bigger mouthful opening. Okay, and that's very, very important for babies because babies really need to take big mouthful. You can see in a picture there, the baby is really opening the mouth quite wide. The hand of the parent is quite far back on the upper back rather than anywhere near the head. So baby can tilt the head back beautifully and start coming onto the breast with the chin actually leading. You can see the nose to nipple. So when we talk about nose to nipple, it means that the trajectory of the nipple is as if it was going inside of baby's nose, as you can see in the first picture. So we are not putting a nipple opposite the nose, but we are actually touching this little filter, this little cupid's bow on a baby's upper lip with our nipple, and therefore the trajectory is quite diagonal, as if it was going into the baby's nose. But obviously it will not, because babies will open their mouth and then take a big mouthful as soon as baby opens the mouth. We bring the baby onto the breast with the chin leading, and baby takes a big mouthful and comes onto the breast.
So we're going to go over some of the positions that you may feed your baby in. Very likely for your first feed, you will probably do laid back position. Basically, because you've just had a baby, you're not likely to sit up straight away, whether that be cesarean or vaginal birth. So the way laid back nursing works is that you place your baby on your chest. Straight after birth, they will go through a pattern of behavior where they begin to become interested in the breast, and they start to lick their lips and find their hand, and the baby will start bobbing around and trying to find the breast. And actually, if they're left to their own devices, they will find their own way to the breast and actually latch on. There are lots of videos of this available. If you search the breast crawl, as in like a crawling baby, CRAWL, you will be able to find lots of videos about this happening, basically. So our babies are hardwired to find their first feed. And actually, if they're left to it and latch themselves on like this, they will often be able to recreate this later as well. So it can get breastfeeding off to a really good start. But you can do laid back nursing at any time. You can do it in the early days. You can do it when they're later. You can do it when they're toddlers. It's a very lovely position to be able to use. You can even do twins in laid back position as well. And they will latch on together. This is probably the most common position that you will see. And actually, it's mainly because it's the easiest one to do when you're out and about. So that's why you tend to see it more often. So because you can sort of feed with no cushions and with, on any chair and such like in this position. So we have cradle hold or cross cradle hold. So the difference is which hand you are holding the baby with. The picture on the right, they are doing cross cradle because the baby is supported mainly with the opposite hand to the breast. And on the middle picture, we have cradle hold, where the baby is supported mainly with the same same hand to breast. Cross cradle is a little bit easier to do in the early days, I would suggest. You can see that lovely hand position that Miriam was discussing there, with the fingers and the thumbs in behind the ears and the hand flat on baby's shoulder blades, and that allows their head to tilt back. So that can actually work very well. And you can bring the other arm round once baby's latched, just like in the picture, and lean back a bit. Your body will support the baby. You don't really even need a cushion, to be fair. You can slide a cushion in under your elbow or something like that, like in the middle picture. We usually suggest trying to latch the baby without a feeding cushion to begin with, and then you can slide something in to support you supporting the baby. Sometimes feeding cushions can get in the way of baby putting their head back, or maybe they are not in the right height for you to be able to feed effectively. So it's better to latch without to begin with. With cradle hold, the risk of cradle hold, which is the same arm to breast, is that, again, sometimes your arm can get in the way of baby being able to put their head back. So sometimes sliding baby down more towards your wrist will help with that a little bit, actually. That's something to think about. I would usually suggest trying cross cradle first, but if you are, for example, very right-handed and you're having to use your left hand, then you may consider cradle hold as well for the other breast, and see if that helps you get a good latch.
Another quite a good position is the rugby hold position. So this is a position where baby is positioned under mom's arms like a rugby ball. If you are playing rugby, if you are holding the ball. You can see quite a few nice pictures in here. The main thing that we need to actually consider is we need to accommodate the length of the baby. So baby needs to be snacking under mom's arm quite far back. So mom might need to use a little bit of a cushion to support their back and move their pelvis actually a little bit forward to create enough space for the baby's body to be nicely curled around her body. Because if babies are not quite far back, they will usually push with their feet and they will end up somewhere in the middle of the chest, which is very difficult to then achieve to nice, comfortable rugby hold position. As you can see in the first picture, this mom is using a like a U-shape pillow, but she actually turned the pillow sideways, so she's creating a little shelf for the baby to actually lie on, which then gives her also support at the back and enough space for the baby to be tucked in underneath mom's arm. But always, as Kathryn said, in terms of any cushions or pillow, we need to consider mom's physiotomy as well. So we don't want to put some large pillow that is not accommodating the mom's body and the baby's body in a correct sinking way. And then the same chin principle applies. We need to make sure the baby can tilt their head back, open their mouth wide, and come onto the breast. The rugby hold position is sometimes preferred by parents who might have a slightly larger breasts because they usually have a better vision in this position. And also sometimes for parents who maybe have a C-section because baby's legs are nowhere near the incision side, so there are no any accidental kicks. But the main thing is we're trying to accommodate baby's length and baby's body. The next position is a koala hold position. It's very similar to the biological nurturing, but in this case, both mom and baby are more upright. Again, some parents do prefer this one over the lying back. So whichever position works better for you, that's really the one that you will choose. You can straddle the baby across mom's leg. Sometimes, again, depending on mom's torso and baby's length, we need to accommodate those two as well. So sometimes mom might need to actually straddle the baby on the opposite leg to the breast the baby is coming to if baby is a little bit tall. But we also can use a little bit of a gravity if we let the baby maybe fall slightly backwards while we are holding baby in the same nice hold as before on the upper back. Then the gravity will usually help baby to open their mouth wide. Mommy will approach the baby with their chest, breast, and then once baby is latched on, then mommy can make it more sustainable and go either back into more upright position or actually going further back into the more laid back position.
And another position that is very useful is side lying position. This position is sometimes a little trickier to get a good latch, so many people start trying maybe a few weeks into breastfeeding, but some people can actually do it from birth, and it's actually quite a good one to do when you have had a cesarean, because again, you're not having to sit up and twist your body around and such like. You can do it from lying down. It's also a very safe way if you are feeling that you are going to fall asleep whilst breastfeeding. This is a safe way to do so. You are naturally lying in a kind of C shape in recovery position, really. And so you are not able to roll on your baby. You won't be able to roll. And so if you do feel like you're going to fall asleep whilst you're feeding, this is actually the safest position to do this in a well set up bed. The trick is to keep baby very, very close into your body and get that head tilted back, again, just as Miriam was describing with the other positions. And that's what can make it a little bit challenging. So you can start, as the mum is in this picture, just lifting yourself up on your elbow slightly. You may need to just move your breast with the other hand sometimes a little bit to lift the nipple. Depends very much on your physiology as to how easy it will be. So we always suggest to practice it in the daytime, because trying a new position at 3 a.m. when everybody is half asleep and you have a screaming baby is not the easiest thing to do. So have a go maybe in the daytime. Maybe if you want to have a nap with your baby, that could be a good time to practice this position and see if you can master it and get a good latch.
So what are the signs of good attachment? So the baby's mouth needs to be really, really wide open. As I mentioned earlier, once baby is still their head back, they can really open their mouth quite wide so they can take a large amount of mom's breast tissue into their mouth. Areola, which is the round bit around the nipple, can be sometimes visible, but there should be more visible at the baby's upper lip in whichever position they are, rather than at the chin, because they are coming onto the breast quite asymmetrical. Therefore, they will take a large amount of the breast tissue with their lower jaw rather than the top. The chin is nicely indented in the breast because it's the movement of the chin that actually tries to milk the breast and remove the milk correctly. And the cheeks are nice and puffed up. If the baby's cheeks are sunken in, that are kind of sucking them in, that means that they don't have enough of mom's breast tissue in their mouth, because the whole mouth cavity of the baby should really be filled with mom's breast tissue. If that is the case, it's always better to take the baby off and bring them onto the breast again to achieve a deeper latch. There should be a little gap between the nose and the breast. If babies are too smooshed into the breast, sometimes if you just bring a little bit of pressure on the upper back, will help babies to tilt the head back a little bit further, indenting the chin into the mom's breast and creating enough space between the nose and the breast. There should be deep rhythmic sucks with swallows, and we'll go into that in a moment, and there is no pain. When we talk about the pain, there shouldn't be persistent bad pain all the way through the feed. If that is happening, please seek help. However, some parents might feel a little bit of discomfort or even a little bit of maybe just a pain at the beginning. Count slowly to about 10 or 15 seconds. If the pain is not subsiding, please take the baby off and try to latch the baby on again a little bit deeper. If this is persisting, please seek skilled help.
So some other way that we can tell whether the milk is going into the baby, because we can't actually measure it and see it when we are breastfeeding, so we need to know what to look for. So we're looking for these nice deep sucks and swallows that Miriam described, and they will go through a little pattern during the breastfeed. So they will start off when they first latch doing some sort of faster, rapid and short sucks. This is what gets the oxytocin flowing. They will get a little bit of milk during this period. There's some in the breast, but it's a slow flow. Sometimes babies, if they're very sleepy, will just go to sleep during this period. You may need to take them off, wake them back up and put them back on again. Or sometimes they get a little bit fractious, they come on and off a little bit and they kind of don't seem to be kind of getting a good latch. After a minute or so, we get our milk ejection reflex, because it takes a little bit of time for the messages to get to the brain that we need the oxytocin to squeeze the milk down into the breast. So when you see this, some people will feel their letdown reflex, their milk ejection reflex. Other people will not feel it. It's completely normal either way. Some people do get a little bit of pain sometimes with their letdown reflex as well. So if you get a stabbing pain sort of about a minute into the feed, sometimes it can be that, but it's fairly rare, thankfully. Most people, they might feel a whooshing sensation or a sort of tingling sensation. But again, if you feel nothing, you can watch the baby and you can see it happening, because your baby will suddenly start to do much deeper sucks, slower sucks, and they will have bursts, and then they will have a break, and then they will have another burst of sucking, and they'll have a break. And you should be able to hear some swallows, and if you can't hear them, you should be able to see them. They have a slightly bigger chin drop when they are swallowing than when they're not swallowing. We usually expect somewhere between a swallow every 1 to 3 sucks for most babies who are feeding effectively. So generally, when you first have your milk ejection reflex, the milk flows quite fast. We sometimes see more sucks per swallow. other way around, more it will be less sucks per swallow, so they will be doing maybe 1 suck and swallow every time, and then as the milk flow slows a little bit towards the end of the feed, we may see more sucks before they swallow. As the feed progresses, we see longer pauses between, and we see maybe fewer sucks, and I said more infrequent swallowing as well. And then eventually we get towards the end of the breast, and we go into a sort of lighter flutter sucking sometimes. And sometimes you move the baby and they will start deep sucking again. Or we can do a breast compression, which is where we give a deep squeeze to the breast to increase the flow of the milk, and that can remind them to keep feeding. If you're a little bit unsure whether they have finished, that can be a good test. If the baby has finished, they will just continue some light flutter sucks and you won't see the sort of swallows that you see. That is the sort of pattern that we expect to go through every time we put baby to breast, whether that's the first breast, second breast, whether they've been cluster feeding. So we usually suggest to offer the second breast as well. So if your baby is in the flutter sucking, they will sometimes come off themselves, or they will fall asleep and the breast will just kind of drift out of baby's mouth. Take them off and you realize that they haven't really got it in there in the first place anymore. But there are some babies who do like to hang out all day and just flutter suck. So if you're getting very long feeds with a large proportion of flutter sucking, you can take them off when they are no longer actively feeding, when they're not doing those deep sucks and swallows. We do not want to take a baby off whilst they are doing their deep sucks and swallows. It's very important for them to finish that before we remove them. But if they're doing lots of light flutter sucking, you can take them off. We tend to suggest to offer the second breast every feed to begin with. Sometimes your baby may not want it, that is okay, but it's good to offer. So you may just give your baby a cuddle for 5 or 10 minutes, kind of let all the sleepy hormones wear off. Baby will often rouse themselves and want to have another go, and we can latch them onto the other side. If your baby is very sleepy, you may want to try and nappy change at this point to see if we can wake them back up again and to let them have a go on the second breast. And they may only take a small amount, but that's absolutely fine. Think of it as main course and pudding. In the early days, especially, sometimes our babies may want to have more than 2 goes on the breast. We call this cluster feeding. Cluster feeding is very important to understand because it's very, very common, and many parents misinterpret it as them not having enough milk, but actually it's just a very normal newborn behavior. And this is basically when they're wanting to maybe have a 3rd or 4th go, or even a 5th or 6th. Sometimes it can go on for several hours. Think of it like an all-you-can-eat buffet. That's what your baby's asking for. They keep going back for a little bit more and a little bit more. It's very common to happen on the sort of second night after baby is born. We think it helps bring the mum's milk in abundance, but also it's very common during the night to begin with. Unfortunately, our babies often feed much more at night than they do in the daytime for the first few weeks. And also we get a period in the late evening, maybe around week 2 to 3, this begins. In the late evening, we get a cluster feeding period, sometimes called the witching hour. Babies are very unsettled and want to feed a lot. And sometimes we can have a second sort of mini version in the early hours of the morning as well, about 4 or 5 a.m. They will often have a little burst of cluster feeding at that point as well. So it is very, very normal newborn behavior and to be expected. So if it happens with your baby, please don't think there's something wrong.
So when to feed the baby? So the main thing is frequently. Babies really need to feed very, very frequently because they don't feed just for nutrition, but they also feed for the bonding, for the security, for the instincts, and for all of that as well. So any response, we will always try to feed the baby in the first instance. But as you can see on those pictures, so the best time to start actually feeding your baby is when they are showing those early cue signs. They are saying, I'm getting hungry. They are starting to stir, their mouth is opening, they're starting to turn their head, and they're starting to seek and root the breast. So when they are in the early awakening cues, this is the best time to bring the baby to the breast because they are nice and relaxed and calm, and they usually come onto the breast much, much easier. When they are in a mid-Q stage, this is when they are starting to waken up a little bit more. There's more activity going on. They might be starting to stretch, or they might start to bicycle with their legs. Their increased physical activity generally, their eyes are opening a little bit more, the hand is coming to the mouth, and they're showing quite a more signs, but they're still quite nice and relaxed. This is again not a good time to bring the baby into the breast. When they are in the late Q stages, by this point, they are crying, they are quite agitated, angry, they're red in the face, really not quite happy. It might be quite difficult to bring the baby onto the breast at this stage because they are quite unsettled. So you might want to do maybe rocking or doing skin to skin or just talking, singing to the baby. So they can come into the mid-Q or the early Q stages and get a little bit calmer before you bring them onto the breast. So the average baby feeds in a newborn period is roughly around 11 times, but it quite varies. And the upper number, there really isn't one, because as Kathryn said already, sometimes the cluster feeding, there might be several goes at the breast, several feeds in one session. However, the minimum a baby should feed is 3 hourly. And this is usually quite misunderstood sentence. So it doesn't mean that the babies should feed 3 hourly. However, the emphasis is on the minimum. So we really have to make sure that our babies are feeding and getting some food at least every 3 hours from the beginning of the previous feed, because sometimes they can be great pretenders and they can actually shut down and conserve their energy. And sometimes it can look like they are sleeping for longer periods of time, and parents may mistake this for babies are really good in the brackets because they sleep long periods of times. However, in a newborn period, which is the first few weeks, this can be quite dangerous for babies because they might not be getting enough of their food and their milk intake. So it's important to feed babies a minimum of 8 times in any 24 hours. So obviously, how do you know if your baby is getting enough? So what comes in has to come out, especially in the first few weeks. The nappy output is your greatest indicator whether babies are getting enough or not. So in the first 24 hours, we want to see one black tarry stool, and then we want to see at least 2 stools the size of roughly the 2-pound coin. Majority of babies may actually stool several times a day, and that's absolutely fine. But the color is going to change in the first few days from quite black on day 1 to 2 to quite brownish on day 2 to 3, greenish on day 3 to 4, and generally from day 5 onwards, we should see mustardy yellow stool. Exclusively newborn babies stool can sometimes look quite watery or kind of paste-like. It can have little grains in them as well, and that is all absolutely normal. In terms of the wet nappies, on day 1, 1 wet nappy, on day 2, 2, and so on, increasing by 1 every day until they are about 6 days old. And then we should see about 6 wet nappies in any 24 hours. And we always talk about 24 hours, whether we are talking about feeds or milk intake or stool or sleep or anything like that. So we don't separate it for day and night, but we talk about 24 hours. Once babies are past the newborn stage, which is generally considered the first 6 weeks, especially exclusively breastfed babies, if everything is going fine, the breastfeeding is going well, the babies are putting on weight appropriately, and there are no issues, some babies can stool several times a day, and some might stool only every few days. As long as everything is fine, that is absolutely normal pattern of stooling for babies.
So how do you know when to feed your baby? We've talked a little bit about frequency, but what are the reasons? So you will see lots of things online saying You may be able to identify different cries for your baby, and you may be able to tell their different needs. However, for most breastfed babies, the answer to most of those needs is to breastfeed. So it's absolutely fine to offer the breast for your baby for all sorts of reasons. We don't sometimes know what they are. It's absolutely fine to try the breast first and see if it works. So, of course, it can be for hunger and thirst, but it can also be more for the sort of comfort side of things, for fear and loneliness and, cuddles and that kind of stuff. Your baby will likely feed more frequently when they are growing fast. They may feed more frequently when they are unwell. They'll probably feed more frequently in hot weather because they are thirsty. Very, very normal. If they are in pain, breastfeeding is actually one of the most effective forms of pain relief that you can actually give your baby. And of course, if they're tired, breastfeeding has lots and lots of sleepy hormones involved, partly oxytocin and something called CCK, which is in the milk, and helps settle your baby to sleep. Now, you'll read all sorts of things online to say that you should not feed your baby to sleep. This is absolutely not the case at all. It is completely normal and natural thing for your baby to fall asleep when they're breastfeeding, and it settles them beautifully. In fact, we call it a complete superpower. You will be able to settle your baby to sleep, very, very easily if you breastfeed them to sleep. And actually, you cannot prevent them falling asleep at the breast. It's actually usually impossible to do that. So just kind of go with the flow and use your superpower as much as you possibly can, and you'll find that that's a lot easier. But you also may need to breastfeed for certain reasons as well. Responsive feeding is about responding to your own needs as well as your baby's. So you may need to go out. It's absolutely fine to wake your baby before you go out. It's just sensible, isn't it, to feed them before you leave? That is absolutely fine to do. You may need to have a sit down and a rest, or you might want to escape the housework. You might need a cuddle. You may also need to sleep. The hormones that work on the baby also work on the breastfeeding parent. So you will find that you will fall asleep very, very easily once you've just breastfed. And that can be very useful. It's actually very protective because we do obviously need to feed quite frequently overnight. But actually, we find that if we're breastfed, we fall asleep very, very easily. So it means actually we get probably more milk, more sleep than most formula feeding or bottle feeding parents do, because they have to then settle themselves down to sleep after they've been feeding, and they don't have the same hormonal response. So there are a lot of research out there actually shows that breastfeeding parents do actually get slightly more sleep than bottle feeding parents. And of course, you may feel a bit engorged. So say you've missed a feed, or say your baby slept longer than usual, or that, in the early days when your milk first comes in, we can feel a bit engorged. And it's okay to wake your baby and to put them to the breast. So we're going to talk a little bit about engorgement now. So full breasts, when our milk comes in, we often feel very full to begin with, and they are warm, firm, and tender and heavy. They may show some marbling. You may be able to see the veins, especially if you have fairer skin. But they should flow easily and you should feel well. When we have engorgement, which is fairly common when your milk comes in, but also you can get engorged if your baby does have a longer stretch of sleep later on, or if you're back at work, or all sorts of reasons why you may miss a feed. For engorgement, they will feel hot and hard and painful and a little bit shiny. They may look inflamed. If you've got lighter skin, they may look red. If you've got darker skin, you may just see a sort of change of pigment. The milk actually doesn't flow well when they're in this state. And sometimes you have a little bit of a fever as well. You feel like, you're slightly fluey. We're going to talk a little bit about how to cope with these engorged breasts. We're also going to talk about blocked ducts and mastitis as well, because they're all actually caused by the same thing, which is inflammation. So the way we tackle inflammation when we are dealing with breastfeeding problems, whether that's engorgement, blocked ducts, or mastitis, is we put cold compresses onto the breast. There is still some misinformation out there on the internet that warm is good, but actually cold is much, much better to bring down the inflammation, and that then tends to help the milk flow more easily. We also can take ibuprofen. As long as you are safe to take it yourself, it is safe to take during breastfeeding. And as well as pain relief and bringing down fever and such like, it also brings down swelling. So it's a very useful medication if you're suffering quite badly with any of these. And we can do gentle lymphatic massage. That is a gentle massage from the nipple up into the armpit or the clavicle, think about sort of applying suntan lotion, that kind of pressure, and that can help move any excess fluid away from the breast. And especially if you have a blockage, like you have a blocked duct, sometimes the milk can back up behind the blockage and be very uncomfortable. So you can actually move it the opposite way back into your lymph system, and your body will then just get rid of the excess. So blocked duct is where some milk is trapped in the blockage and it causes inflammation, which then causes swelling, which then blocks the duct more, and we get a little kind of buildup of milk, and it can be tender and hard, a little bit hard to touch sometimes. It can be painful. You feel a lump. And again, all the same treatments. Continue feeding during all of these as well. And then mastitis is kind of a more severe version of a blocked duct. There's two types of mastitis. There's inflammatory mastitis, which is how it begins. Same process we've just described. If you find that this is not working and your flu-like symptoms and maybe your red patch and your lump is not reducing or it is continuing to get worse after around 12 to 24 hours of you first noticing it, then we would go to the GP and we would get some antibiotics, because inflammatory mastitis can turn into infected mastitis, and it can happen quite quickly within maybe 12 to 24 hours of first getting the symptoms. Sometimes mastitis comes on very quickly. Sometimes we get the fever and flu-like symptoms before you actually see anything on the breast as well. So if you do feel a little bit fluey, keep a very close eye on your breast and see what it looks like and whether there's a lump and whether it begins to get inflamed. So mastitis can get severe very quickly, so do try and get the antibiotics. If it's at the weekend or a Friday evening or a holiday, try to get the prescription. So you may be able to get that via just sort of phoning the GP and see if they can give you a prescription. Perhaps go and pick the antibiotics up, but it just means that you've got them in stock then if you think that you need them. So that can be useful. And then the other common problem that we have is tracked nipples. So we've talked about getting a deep latch, and we've talked about that pain. So something else to look for is that you may find that the nipple looks a little bit squashed when it comes out of baby's baby's mouth, sorry. If it looks sort of like one of those new lipstick where it's sort of pointy and flat, at the end, then that can be a sign that you're getting a shallow latch. Eventually what happens if you get that pointy nipple the whole time is you get a crack developing across that ridge that you're making, and it can bleed, and it's very, very painful. So we want to try and avoid cracked nipples. The treatment is actually getting help and getting a good latch. That's the best treatment for cracked nipples. We can aid them healing a little bit we can use some Vaseline or some lanolin just to kind of keep the area moist, and that will aid the healing process. And you can use some compresses with Vaseline in as well. There's all sorts of things that you can do, but actually the main thing is to seek support and get that latch improved, and that will stop it happening. So actually, if you're getting any of these signs, it's better to get support in before the cracks happen if possible. So hopefully we'll not get into this state in the first place if you're feeling that your latch is not quite there and it's a bit painful.
We'll talk a little bit about hand expressing, because hand expressing is a great tool to have for any support with breastfeeding. In the first few days, we would generally suggest hand expressing only because, as I mentioned, the colostrum comes in very small quantities. And also, if, for example, for any reason, unexpectedly, you need to be separated from your baby, you will always have the access to your hands. So if there is any engorgement happening, as Kathryn was mentioning, then you can relieve it via hand expressing as well. Or if you, at the last minute, need to express some breast milk for your baby as well. So the main thing is that we are trying to stimulate the release of the oxytocin, so the let down the milk ejection reflex can start to happening. So we start with a gentle massage, and this can be whatever feels comfortable for you. It can be just a tapping or rolling between your palms, or maybe gentle kneading of the breast. And you want to do it for a few minutes so the oxytocin can actually start to be released. After this, you might also want to just to stimulate your nipple a little bit. You can either roll it between your thumb and an index finger, or just kind of rub a palm of your hand a little bit. This is again simulating what babies would be doing when they come towards the breast. They start licking the breast, nuzzling, kissing the breast before they actually latch on usually. Then you place your finger, your index finger and your thumb roughly about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters behind the base of the nipple. And you use a C shape to position the fingers about 2.5 centimeters behind the base of the nipple. And then what you try to do is you are actually compressing the breast. So the action of your hand is compression. So you are not sliding on the surface of the breast, but you are compressing the tissue inside of the breast. You need to compress, hold for a few seconds and release. And you get into a little bit of a rhythm. Because the milk ducts are 360 degrees, you can, after you finish top and bottom, you can move your hands slightly sideways and then do compression and expressing from that point until you go all the way around the breast. If you want to do some antenatal harvesting of colostrum, which means that you want to express some breast milk before baby arrives, I would always suggest speaking to a midwife, whether that's advisable in your individual case, but it's always an option rather than something that you have to do. Okay, so don't feel under any pressure to do that. If we are expressing colostrum, whether antenatally or postnatally, we would usually use a little syringe like this, so we can collect any of the lovely drops from the breast that way. And we can also feed the colostrum to the baby through the syringe. Once there is a little bit more of colostrum or breast milk, you might use a vessel, something like a little cup like that, or anything like a shot glass, or even a clean bowl, or you can also use sometimes a spoon, especially for colostrum, just to collect those lovely drops. So the next question is usually whether parents need to buy a pump before baby arrives. Because there are different types of pumps for different circumstances, we would generally suggest not to buy anything before your baby arrives, because the pump that might be good for your individual situation would be best determined after a breastfeeding assessment and maybe consultation with the lactation consultant, who can advise you which is the best pump for you and for your baby, depending on what's happening with the breastfeeding journey. But just an overview, we have the silicone milk collecting vessels, which we would always use very sparingly, despite the fact that sometimes parents try to use them very frequently. They might lead to a lot of issues, a lot of problems like oversupply, because pretty much mom's body will think that she is feeding twins. And I also think that sometimes using this collection a vessel on one breast while trying to learn how to feed your baby in the first few days, first few weeks might be a little bit difficult as well. Then we have a hand pumps when we are going to use our hand to actually extract the milk, which means that we are individually with our hand compressing the plunger. Then we have electric pumps, and these come as a single units or double units. So if you have a single units, we can express one breast at a time, but majority of them come now as a double units, where you will be expressing both breasts at the same time. Then we also have a variable pumps, which moms put into their bra, so they are not attached to a machine to collect the breast milk. Again, these are sometimes good for anyone who maybe needs to return to work or things like that. And then we have the gold standard, which is the hospital grade multi-user pumps. However, if you want more information, we have a dedicated workshop about expressing your breast milk, where we go into much more details about pumps and everything around expressing. So please check out our Expressing Your Breast Milk workshop as well. Responsive bottle feeding. Obviously, sometimes parents choose to bottle feed, or sometimes there might be a medical reason why we need to give babies some additional milk feeds. So we know that if we are doing responsive paced bottle feeding, that is a little bit better for the relationship and for the baby to come in from a breast onto the bottle, because the flow is slowing down, and we're trying to create similar feed as if the baby was fed on a breast. We also have a dedicated workshop about introducing a bottle to the breastfed baby as well, where again we go into much more in depth about introducing a bottle to your baby. But the main principles are we're holding the baby nice and close. As you can see there in a picture, the baby is quite upright. So it's important not to have a baby laying down on their back. So we want them to be quite nice, upright, and very close to mom's or dad's body, or whoever is giving the bottle to the baby. We always try to encourage rooting, so we are touching the teat of the bottle to the baby's upper lip, to the philtrum, so the baby can take the teat themselves. So we are never trying to insert the nipple teat into the baby's mouth when they are not ready or where they are not wanting the teat. Then we're trying to hold the bottle horizontal, as you can see there in the picture, because we're trying to slow down the flow. If we take the bottle upside down, the volume and the flow of the milk from the bottle will overwhelm the baby, and they can then take the bottle very quickly and guzzle it down very quickly, which actually is not quite good for the babies, because then they usually swallow a lot of air as well, because they have no way of controlling the flow of the milk coming at them. Giving them a little break by lowering the bottle so they are actually sucking on an empty teat, especially when they have the little pause when they need to catch up with their breathing, is also very important, so they are not overwhelmed by a lot of dripping milk. It's important not to force the full feed and just watch for a baby's cues. So when they start closing their lips or pushing the bottle out or starting to turn their heads, these are all indications that they had enough. And this is also what lactation consultants and both Kathryn and myself are supporting parents a lots of times with, where we give them the information about what is the correct amount for their individual baby, because unfortunately on a formula packaging the amount is highly generalized and exaggerated. So just be please aware of that, not to force the full feed. It's also important to maybe just limit who gives the bottles to the baby. Maybe one or two caregivers, especially while babies are learning how to bottle feed, because we all hold the babies slightly differently, we all engaged with the babies differently, and we also hold the bottle slightly differently. So for consistency, it might be good if we don't include too many people in bottle feeding the baby, especially to begin with.
Milk storage, breast milk storage, and this also covers colostrum storage as well. So breast milk storage, freshly expressed milk or colostrum is okay at room temperature for between 4 to 6 hours. If it's a hot day or your room is hot or your house is warm, then we would probably be cautious and do 4. If it's really hot, you may even want to think more like 3. But in a sort of cool room or in the winter, then you'll probably find it's absolutely fine up to 6 hours. If you're unsure, you can taste it, you can sniff it, make sure you don't think it's drawn off before you give it to baby. In the fridge, at the back of the fridge, not the door, it is okay for your milk to be in there for 6 days. It may even be okay for 8 days. Again, you would test it and sniff it and see whether you think it's okay. We do not keep milk in the door, and for that, because basically when you open and shut the door, it causes that area of the fridge to be less cold. So we keep milk at the back of the fridge. We have 6 months as well in the freezer. That's a standard freezer. If you have a really efficient freezer which stays at -18 degrees consistently, and maybe one that you don't go into every 5 minutes, so maybe like a deep freeze or something like that, then your milk will actually be fine for 12 months. So yeah, that it sort of varies depending on the type of freezer that you have. So the way to remember it roughly in your head is 666. 6 hours at room temperature, 6 days in the fridge, 6 months in the freezer. That kind of works well. If you have warmed your baby's milk and they have not touched it, so they didn't want to feed, or maybe the partner warmed the milk and then mum came home early and breastfed instead, you can put it back in the fridge and use it within 24 hours, okay? And you can warm it twice. Once it's been warmed twice, you would probably discard it if it was not used after that. You don't get the full 6 days if you have already warmed the milk. If the baby has drank from the bottle, though, we do need to discard it within a couple of hours. Okay, so within 2 hours, because the saliva will have been introduced to the milk, and that can cause bacteria to grow more quickly. If we are trying to defrost frozen milk, it's better if possible to defrost it maybe overnight in the fridge slowly, and then we can warm it to use it. However, in an emergency, for example, if the breastfeeding parent has gone out and their car's broken down and you need to give some milk to the baby, you can defrost it quickly in warm water. We don't ever microwave milk, okay, because it can cause hot spots and it can actually burn, and it actually sort of damages some of the nutrients a little bit more as well if we're microwaving milk. Defrosted milk, once it's fully defrosted, and that means there's no ice crystals left in it, so you can give the bag a little bit of a scrunch and see whether you can feel any scrunchy bits. You need to use the milk within 24 hours once it's fully defrosted, and the same with colostrum. So if you are doing some antenatal colostrum harvesting, which is where you hand express in pregnancy so that you get a little bit of a head start, again, we need to use that colostrum. If it's been in the freezer, we need to use it within 24 hours of it defrosting. So if you are going for an induction, you may not have a baby for maybe a day or two. Leave your colostrum at home. We do not want the hospital to partner to throw it away, all that hard work. So just to say, if, for example, you have a power cut, or your partner leaves the freezer door open, or something along those lines, if you can still feel ice crystals in the milk, then it's okay to refreeze the milk, okay? But if it has fully defrosted, then you would either have to feed it to the baby, or you could put it in your bath or their bath. If we ever need to discard milk, we try not to just throw it away. We try and use it. So you can make lotions, you can make soap, you can put it in the bath, have a milk bath, you can do all sorts of things with it. So try not to throw it down the sink if you possibly can. But yeah, we can lots of stuff that you can kind of try with it, basically. We don't like throwing it away.
So how long should you breastfeed? Any amount of breastfeeding is good for baby and good for mom as well. However, the exclusive breastfeeding offers a lot more protection because it's dose related. There are so many shades of gray when it comes to breastfeeding, and it really depends on your individual situation and your individual preference. However, it is slightly dose related, so more breastfeeding is happening, the more protection it's giving both to mom and a baby. But we honestly value every single drop your baby gets. The World Health Organization recommends exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months, and then breastfeeding alongside complementary solid foods to 2 years and beyond. And it's really, really up to you and your baby to decide and choose how long you want to breastfeed, because it's your unique journey and your unique relationship.
And that's the end of our workshop. Here is our contact details, our websites, our social media accounts. Please do give us a follow. And if you do need any support, you know where to find us. Myself and Miriam are in Harrow and Pinner in Northwest London if you need us face to face. But we are also available for online support as well. So if you do need some support and you can't find something locally, do drop one of us a message and we can help you out. But hope you enjoyed the session, and lovely to talk to you today.
And please also check out any of our live sessions as well, and all our other offerings of different topics of workshops that we have on offer. Please spread the word about our workshop and tell your friends, or maybe even buy them as a gift to any new or expectant parents, which might be quite nice and quite thoughtful gift as well. I hope you enjoyed the workshop and hopefully see you at another one. All the best. Bye.